The Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal consisted of the organized child sexual abuse that occurred in the town of Rotherham, South Yorkshire, Northern England from the late 1980s until the 2010s, and the failure of local authorities to act on reports of the abuse throughout most of that period. Researcher Angie Heal, who was hired by local officials and warned them about child exploitation occurring between 2002 and 2007, has since described it as the biggest child protection scandal in UK history. Evidence of the abuse was first noted in the early 1990s, when care home managers investigated reports that children in their care were being picked up by taxi drivers. From at least 2001, multiple reports passed names of alleged perpetrators, several from one family, to the police and Rotherham Council. The first group conviction took place in 2010, when 5 British Pakistani men were convicted of sexual offences against girls aged 12-16. From January 2011, Andrew Norfolk of The Times pressed the issue, reporting in 2012 that the abuse in the town was widespread, and that the police and council had known about it for over 10 years. The Times articles, along with the 2012 trial of the Rockdale child sex abuse ring, prompted the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee to conduct hearings. Following this and further articles from Norfolk, Rotherham Council commissioned an independent inquiry led by Professor Alexis J. In August 2014, the J report concluded that an estimated 1,400 children had been sexually abused in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013 by predominantly British Pakistani men. Kurdish and Kosovar men were also involved. British Asian girls in Rotherham also suffered abuse, but a fear of shame and dishonor made them reluctant to report the abuse to authorities. A common thread was that taxi drivers had been picking the children up for sex from care homes and schools. The abuse included gang rape, forcing children to watch rape, dousing them with petrol and threatening to set them on fire, threatening to rape their mothers and younger sisters, and trafficking them to other towns. There were pregnancies, one at age 12, terminations, miscarriages, babies raised by their mothers, and babies removed, causing further trauma. The failure to address the abuse was attributed to a combination of factors revolving around race, class and gender, contemptuous and sexist attitudes toward the mostly working-class victims, fear that the perpetrator's ethnicity would trigger allegations of racism and damage community relations, the Labour Council's reluctance to challenge a Labour voting ethnic minority, lack of a child-centered focus, a desire to protect the town's reputation, and lack of training and resources. Rotherham Council's chief executive, its director of children's services, and the police and crime commissioner for South Yorkshire Police all resigned. The Independent Police Complaints Commission and the National Crime Agency both opened inquiries, the latter expected to last 8 years. The government appointed Louise Casey to conduct an inspection of Rotherham Council. Published in January 2015, the Casey report concluded that the council had a bullying, sexist culture of covering up information and silencing whistleblowers, and was not fit for purpose. In February 2015, the government replaced the council's elected officers with a team of 5 commissioners. As a result of new police inquiries, 19 men and 2 women were convicted in 2016 and 2017 of sexual offenses in the town dating back to the late 1980s. One of the ringleaders was jailed for 35 years. Background: Rotherham, with a population of 109,691, according to the 2011 census, 55,751 female and 24,783 age 0-17, Rotherham is the largest town within the South Yorkshire Metropolitan Borough of Rotherham. Around 11.9% of the town belong to black and minority ethnic groups, compared to 8% of the borough, population 258,400. 3% of the borough belonged to the Pakistani heritage community. There were 68,574 Christians in the town in 2011, 23,909 with no religion, 8,682 Muslims, 7,527 not stated, and a small number of Hindus, Sikhs, Jews and Buddhists. Unemployment in the borough was above the national average, and 23% of homes consisted of social housing. The area has traditionally been a Labour stronghold, and until Sarah Champion was elected in 2012, it had never had a female MP. The council was similarly male-dominated, one Labour insider told The Guardian in 2012. The Rotherham political class is male, male, male. In May 2014, there were 63 elected members on Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, 57 Labour, 4 Conservatives, 1 UKIP and 1 Independent. The elections in August that year saw a swing to UKIP, 49 Labour, 10 UKIP, 2 Conservatives and 2 Independents. The government disbanded the council in 2015 after the Casey report and replaced it with a team of 5 commissioners. Terminology: the term child sexual exploitation, CSE, was first used in 2009 in a UK Department for Education document. Intended to replace the term child prostitution, which implied a level of consent, CSE is a form of child sexual abuse in which children are offered something, money, drugs, alcohol, food, a place to stay, or even just affection, in exchange for sexual activity. Violence and intimidation are common. Adele Gladman and Angie Heal, authors of early reports on the Rotherham abuse, argue that describing vaginal, oral and anal rape, murder and attempted murder as exploitation does not help people understand the seriousness of the crimes. CSE includes online grooming and localized grooming, formerly known as on-street grooming. Localized grooming involves a group of abusers targeting vulnerable children in a public place, offering them sweets, alcohol, drugs and takeaway food in exchange for sex. The targets can include children in the care of the local authority. In Rotherham, 1/3 of the targeted children were previously known to social services. According to the House of Commons Home Affairs Committee in 2013, the first contact might be made by other children, who hand the target over to an older man. One of the adult perpetrators becomes the boyfriend, but the girl is used for sex by the larger group and comes to view this as the norm. The abuse can involve being gang raped by dozens of men during one event. Victims are often trafficked to other towns, where sexual access to the child might be sold to other groups. According to one victim, the perpetrators prefer children aged 12-14. As they get older, the group loses interest and may expect the child to supply younger children in exchange for continued access to the group, on which the child has come to rely for drugs, alcohol, a social life, affection, or even a home. Risky business. The earliest reports of localized grooming in Rotherham date to the early 1990s, when several managers of local children's homes set up the Taxi Driver Group to investigate reports that taxis driven by Pakistani men were arriving at care homes to take the children away. The police apparently declined to act. In 1997, Rotherham Council created a local youth project, Risky Business, to work with girls and women aged 11-25 thought to be at risk of sexual exploitation on the streets. Jane Sr., awarded an MBE in the 2016 birthday honors for her role in uncovering the abuse, began working for Risky Business as a coordinator around July 1999. The users were overwhelmingly white girls. Of the 268 who used the project from March 2001 to March 2002, 244 were white, 22 were British Asian, and 2 were black. Senior began to find evidence around 2001 of what appeared to be a localized grooming network. Most Risky Business clients had previously come from Sheffield, which had a red light district. Now the girls were younger and came from Rotherham. Girls as young as 10 were being befriended, perhaps by children their own age, before being passed to older men who would rape them and become their boyfriends. Many of the girls were from troubled families, but not all. The children were given alcohol and drugs, then told they had to repay the debt by having sex with other men. The perpetrators set about obtaining personal information about the girls and their families, where their parents worked, for example, details that were used to threaten the girls if they tried to withdraw. Windows at family homes were smashed. Threats were made to rape mothers and younger sisters. The children came to believe that the only way to keep their families safe was to cooperate. One girl who came to the attention of risky business was repeatedly raped from age 13-15, and believed her mother would be the next victim. They used to follow my mom because they used to know when she went shopping, what time she had been shopping, where she had gone. A 15-year-old was told she was one bullet away from death. Girls were doused in petrol and told they were about to die. When she told her pimp that she was pregnant and did not know who the father was, one 15-year-old was beaten unconscious with a claw hammer. A 12-year-old with a 24-year-old boyfriend had a mother who invited the perpetrators into the family home, where the girl would give the men oral sex for 10 cigarettes. According to Senior, risky business ended up with so much information about the perpetrators that the police suggested she start forwarding it to an electronic Dropbox, Box 5, on the South Yorkshire Police computer network. They reportedly told her this would protect the identity of risky business's sources. She learned later that the police had not read the report she had left there, and it apparently could not be accessed by other forces. Risky business was seen as a nuisance and shut down by the council in 2011. Issues of ethnicity. The J inquiry estimated that there may be 1,400 victims, of diverse ethnic backgrounds. The report also went on to state that agencies should acknowledge the suspected model of localized grooming of young white girls by men of Pakistani heritage, instead of being inhibited by the fear of affecting community relations. The report, however, also stated that there is no simple link between race and child sexual exploitation, and cited a 2013 report by Muslim Women's Network UK of British Asian girls being abused across the country in situations that mirrored the abuse in Rotherham. According to the group, Asian victims may be particularly vulnerable to threats of bringing shame and dishonor on their families, and may have believed that reporting the abuse would be an admission that they had violated their Islamic beliefs. The J report also noted that one of the local Pakistani women's groups had described Pakistani girls being targeted by Pakistani taxi drivers and landlords, but they feared reporting to the police out of concerns for their marriage prospects. The report stated that the underreporting of exploitation and abuse in minority ethnic communities should be addressed. The J report found no evidence of children's social care staff being influenced by concerns about the ethnic origins of suspected perpetrators when dealing with individual child protection cases, including CSE. In the broader organizational context, however, there was a widespread perception that messages conveyed by some senior people in the council and also the police were to downplay the ethnic dimensions of CSE. A 5-year investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct (IOPC) found that the Rotherham police ignored the sexual abuse of children for decades for fear of increasing racial tensions. The IOPC upheld a complaint that a father of one of the victims was told by a police officer the town would erupt if it became known that Asian men were regularly sexually abusing underage white girls. Weir Report, 2001. Home Office pilot study in 2000 at Delaware. Later Gladman, a Yorkshire solicitor, was hired by Rotherham Council as a research and development officer on a Home Office crime reduction program pilot study, Tackling Prostitution. What Works? A section of the study was devoted to young people in prostitution, and 3 towns, Bristol, Sheffield and Rotherham, were to be highlighted in that section. Were was employed to write the report on Rotherham. Part of her project's aim was collection of information and evidence about men allegedly involved in coercing young women into prostitution, with which it might be possible for the police to pursue investigations and/or prosecutions. Researchers at the University of Bedfordshire, including the social scientist Margaret Melrose, were involved as Home Office evaluators. Weir's line manager was the manager of risky business, and she was placed in the risky business offices in Rotherham's International Centre, where she worked with Jane Sr. According to Weir, she encountered poor professional practice from an early stage from the council and police. Child protection issues were, in her view, disregarded, dismissed or minimized. Mapping exercise in response to a complaint from police that evidence of child abuse in Rotherham was anecdotal, Weir compiled a 10-page mapping exercise in 2001 showing what appeared to be a local abuse network. In evidence to the Home Affairs Committee in 2014, she wrote that she had found a small number of suspected abusers who were well known to all significant services in Rotherham. Using material obtained by risky business, and from health services, social services, police records, a homelessness project, and substance misuse services, Weir's report included names of suspects, the registration numbers of cars used to transport the girls, the suspects' links to local businesses and to people outside the area, and the relationships between the suspects and the girls. The suspects included members of the Hussein family, thought to be among the network's ringleaders, who were jailed in 2016. Weir estimated at that point that there were 270 victims. Home Office report. Weir's report for the Home Office evaluators linked 54 abused children to the Hussein family. As of October 2001, 18 children had named one of those men, Arshad Hussein, then around 25, as their boyfriend, and several had become pregnant. One of the 18 girls, 14 years old at the time, got pregnant twice. In 2014 she told Panorama that social workers had expressed concern about Hussein being around a baby because of his history of violence, but had not, according to the victim, expressed the same concern for her. She told Panorama that they maintained her relationship with him was consensual. In February 2016, Arshad Hussein was convicted of multiple rapes and jailed for 35 years. The Weir report continued that members of the family were alleged to be responsible for much of the violent crime and drug dealing in the town. They used untraceable mobile phones, the report said, had access to expensive cars, were linked to a taxi firm, and may have been involved in bed and breakfast hotels that were used by social services for emergency accommodation. Several girls sent to those hotels had complained of being offered money, as soon as they had arrived, if they would have sex with several men. Other girls were targeted at train and bus stations. Weir handed her report to a South Yorkshire police inspector. The only feedback was that it was unhelpful. According to the J report, one incident was, for Weir, the final straw. A victim decided to file a complaint with the police. The perpetrators had smashed her parents' windows and broken her brother's legs to stop her from reporting the rapes. Weir took her to the police station, but while there the victim received a text from the perpetrator to say he had her 11-year-old sister with him, and it was your choice. This led the victim to believe someone had told the perpetrator she was at the police station, and she decided not to proceed with the complaint. Following this, with the consent of her manager, Weir wrote in October 2001 to Mike Hedges, the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police, and to Christine Burberry, the District Commander. The letter said, "I have been visiting agencies, encouraging them to relay information to the police. Their responses have been identical. They have ceased passing on information as they perceive this to be a waste of time. Parents also have ceased to make missing person reports, a precursor to any child abduction investigation, as the police response is often so inappropriate. Children are being left at risk and their abusers unapprehended. The letter was not well received by the council or police. During a meeting at Rotherham police station with senior police and council officials, they seemed incensed that Were had written to the chief constable. James Sr., who was present, said Were was subjected to a tirade that lasted I don't know how long. According to Were, at some point after this an official warned her against mentioning Asian men. She said you must never refer to that again. You must never refer to Asian men. And her other response was to book me on a 2-day ethnicity and diversity course to raise my awareness of ethnic issues. Files removed. At their request, Were sent her data to the Home Office evaluators in Bedfordshire in April 2002. That Were did this apparently upset the risky business manager. On or around Monday, the 18th of April 2002, when she arrived at work, Were discovered that over the weekend her Home Office pilot data had been removed from the filing cabinets in the risky business office. Were said that the password-protected office computer had also been accessed. According to Were's evidence to the Home Affairs Committee, documents had been deleted, and someone had created, on the computer, the minutes of meetings that Were had purportedly attended, which showed her agreeing to certain conditions, such as not submitting data to Home Office evaluators without her line manager's consent. Were told the committee that she had not agreed to those conditions or attended any such meeting. One of the meetings had taken place while she was on holiday overseas. Were was told that social services, the police and education staff had met over the weekend and had decided that risky business staff were exceeding their roles. Were was suspended for having included in her report data from confidential minutes, an act of gross misconduct. She managed to negotiate a return to work by demonstrating that it was her manager who had passed those minutes to the Home Office evaluators. She was told she would no longer have access to risky business data, meetings, or the girls. And in June 2002 she was asked to amend her report to anonymize individuals and institutions and only include facts and evidence that you are able to substantiate. The J report found the secrecy surrounding the report and the treatment of Were deeply troubling. If the senior people concerned had paid more attention to the content of the report, more might have been done to help children who were being violently exploited and abused. Hill reports. 2002 report. In 2002-2007 South Yorkshire Police hired Angie Hill, a strategic drugs analyst, to carry out research on drug use and supply in the area. Located in the Drug Strategy Unit with 2 police officers, Hill wrote several reports during this period. During her research in 2002 into the local supply of crack cocaine, she first encountered examples of organized child sexual abuse, and consulted Jane Sr. of Risky Business and Ann Lucas, the child exploitation service officer in Sheffield. Lucas explained that part of the grooming process was to give the children drugs. Hill's first report in 2002 recommended dealing with the child abuse rings. If the evidence needed to prosecute the men for sex offenses was lacking, they could be prosecuted for drugs offenses instead, thereby keeping the children safe and getting the drugs off the street. Hill wrote in 2017 that her report was widely read, but she could not believe the complete lack of interest in the links she had provided between the local drug trade and child abuse. 2003 report. Hill decided to continue researching the issue and included CSE in her biannual intelligence briefings. While Hill was preparing her second report, Sexual Exploitation, Drug Use and Drug Dealing, Current Situation in South Yorkshire, 2003, Jane Sr. secretly shared with her Delaware's Home Office report from 2002. Hill wrote that she actually felt scared after she had read it, given the level of detail, the lack of interest, and the sidelining of Were. Hill's 2003 report noted that Rotherham had a significant number of girls and some boys who are being sexually exploited, that the victims were being gang raped, kidnapped and subjected to other violence, that a significant number had become pregnant, and were depressed, angry and self-harming, and that Risky Business had identified 4 of the perpetrators as brothers. Hill created 2 versions of her report. One was for wider distribution among officials. The second, for the police alone, contained the names of the perpetrators, obtained from risky business. 2006 report. In 2005, a new Department of Children and Young People's Services was created, with Councillor Sean Wright appointed cabinet member for the department, and in March 2006 a conference was held in Rotherham. Every child matters, but do they know it? To discuss children's sexual exploitation. HEAL's third report, Violence and Gun Crime. Links with sexual exploitation, prostitution and drug markets in South Yorkshire, 2006, noted that the situation was continuing and involved systematic physical and sexual violence against young women. The victims were being trafficked to other towns, and the violence used was very severe. If the girls protested, the perpetrators threatened to involve the girls' younger sisters, friends and family. There had also been an increase in reports of the perpetrators being seen with guns. HEAL wrote that white girls were the main victims, targeted from age 11. The average age was 12-13. British Asian girls were also targeted, but their abuse was hidden, not part of the localized grooming scene. The most significant group of perpetrators of localized grooming were British Asian men. Several employees dealing with the issue believed that the perpetrator's ethnicity was preventing the abuse from being addressed, HEAL wrote. One worker said that British Asian taxi drivers in Rotherham had been involved for 30 years, but in the 1970s the crimes had not been organized. HEAL added that a high-profile publicity campaign was underway about the trafficking of women from Eastern Europe, with posters in Doncaster Sheffield Airport, while the issue of local trafficking appears to be largely ignored. The report recommended more emphasis should be placed on tackling the abusers, rather than the abused. HEAL sent her 2006 report to everyone involved in the Rotherham Drugs Partnership, and to the South Yorkshire Police District Commander and Chief Superintendents. Shortly after this, according to the J report, risky businesses funding was increased, and the Council's Safeguarding Children Board approved an action plan for responding to the sexual exploitation of children and young people in Rotherham. It became clear to HEAL around this time that she was being sidelined. The Drug Strategy Unit was disbanded, and she was told that several officers in her department were not supportive of her or her work. Given that she was reporting the rape of children, she writes that the lack of support will never fail to astonish and sadden her. She decided to leave the South Yorkshire Police in March 2007. Her 2003 and 2006 reports were released by South Yorkshire Police in May 2015 following a Freedom of Information Act request. Operation Central, Trial, 2010. In 2008, South Yorkshire Police set up Operation Central to investigate the allegations. As a result, 8 men were tried at Sheffield Crown Court in October 2010 for sexual offences against girls aged 12-16. 4 of the victims testified. 5 men were convicted, including 2 brothers and a cousin. One of the brothers, Razwan Razak, had a previous conviction for indecently assaulting a young girl in his car, and had breached a previous sexual offences prevention order. His brother Umar appealed against his sentence and was released after 9 months. All 5 were placed on the sex offenders register. The Times investigation. Background: Andrew Norfolk of The Times first wrote about localized grooming in 2003, after moving from London to Leeds, when he wrote a brief story about the Cayley child sex abuse ring. Anne Cryer, MP for Cayley, had complained that men of Pakistani heritage were targeting teenage girls outside schools, while parents alleged that police and social services were declining to act. From then until 2010, Norfolk heard of court cases in Northern England and the Midlands reporting a similar pattern. Groups of men would flatter young girls in public places, offering them alcohol, cigarettes and lifts in fancy cars. One man would become the boyfriend and soon the girls were expected to have sex with the whole group, including contacts out of town. Norfolk writes that most sex offenders in the UK are white men and lone offenders. These cases were distinctive because most of the men had Muslim names and were working in groups. Court records showed 17 cases of localized grooming in 13 northern towns since 1997, 14 since 2008, in which 56 men were convicted of sexual offenses against girls aged 11-16. The cases involved 2 or more men who had groomed young girls they had met on the street. Several cases resembled Rotherham, with girls being passed around groups. Of the 56, 53 were Asian, 50 were Muslim, mostly Pakistani heritage, although Kurdish and Kosovar men were also involved, and 3 were white. Norfolk interviewed 2 of the affected families, and in January 2011 the first of a series of stories appeared over 4 pages in the Times, accompanied by an editorial, revealed "Conspiracy of Silence on UK Sex Gangs." Norfolk told the Home Affairs Committee in 2013 that council staff and senior police officers called him to thank him. One director of children's services told him, "My staff are jumping for joy in the office today because finally somebody has said what we have not felt able to say." Murder of Laura Wilson. In 2012, Rotherham Council applied to the High Court for an injunction to stop Norfolk publishing an unredacted version of a serious case review written after the murder of a local girl, Laura Wilson. Known in the review as Child S. Wilson was 17 in October 2010 when she was stabbed 40 times and thrown in the canal by her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, Ashlek Asghar, an act the police called an honor killing. She had had a baby 4 months earlier by a 21-year-old married man. The families of the men, both Pakistani heritage, had apparently been unaware of the relationships and the existence of the child. Tired of being a secret, Wilson decided to tell them. Days later, the ex-boyfriend murdered her. Both men stood trial. The older man was acquitted, and Asghar was jailed for 17 years and 6 months. Assessed as having an IQ of 56 and a reading and spelling age of 6, Wilson had been the target of localized grooming from at least age 11. The council had referred her to risky business 3 months after her 11th birthday, and when she was 13, Wilson and her family had appeared on the Jeremy Kyle show to discuss children who were out of control. She had also been mentioned in the 2009 criminal inquiry that led to the first 5 convictions arising out of localized grooming in Rotherham. The government ordered that the council publish a serious case review. It was published with passages blacked out on 61 of its 144 pages. Norfolk obtained an unredacted version, and found that the council had hidden the men's ethnicity, as well as Wilson's mention during the 2009 criminal inquiry, and the extent of the council's involvement in her care. Michael Gove, then Education Secretary, accused the council in June 2012 of withholding relevant and important material. After Gove's intervention, the council withdrew its legal action, and Norfolk published the story under the headline, "Officials Hid Vital Facts About Men Suspected of Grooming Girl for Sex." September 2012. On the 24th of September 2012, Norfolk wrote that the abuse in Rotherham was much more widespread than acknowledged, and that the police had been aware of it for over a decade. His story, "Police Files Reveal Vast Child Protection Scandal," was based on 200 leaked documents, some from Jane Sr., such as case files and letters from police and social services. The documents included a Delaware's 2001 report for the Home Office, which linked 54 abused children to the Hussein family. 18 of the children had called Arshid Hussein their boyfriend. Cases highlighted by Norfolk included that of a 15-year-old having a broken bottle inserted into her, a 14-year-old being held in a flat and forced to have sex with 5 men, and a 13-year-old girl, with disrupted clothing, found by police in a house at 3 a.m. with a group of men who had given her vodka. A neighbor had called the police after hearing the girl scream. The girl was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, but the men were not questioned. The newspaper cited a 2010 report by the Police Intelligence Bureau that said, locally and nationally, and particularly in Sheffield and Rotherham, there appears to be a significant problem with networks of Asian males exploiting young white females. South Yorkshire children were being trafficked to Birmingham, Bradford, Bristol, Dover, Manchester, and elsewhere, according to the police report. A document from Rotherham's Safeguarding Children Board reporting that the crimes had cultural characteristics, which are locally sensitive in terms of diversity. There are sensitivities of ethnicity with potential to endanger the harmony of community relationships. Great care will be taken in drafting this report to ensure that its findings embrace Rotherham's qualities of diversity. It is imperative that suggestions of a wider cultural phenomenon are avoided. In August 2013, Norfolk published the story of a 15-year-old Rotherham girl, later revealed to be Sammy Woodhouse, who had been described in a Delaware's report in 2001, and who was allowed by social services to maintain contact with Arshad Hussain, despite having been placed in care by her parents to protect her from him. Hussain was jailed in 2016 for 35 years. The girl had been made pregnant twice. One of those aware of the relationship, according to the Times, was Jahangir Akhtar, then Rotherham Council's deputy leader, reportedly a relative of Hussain's. He resigned but denied the claims. Akhtar was one of the officials later described in the Casey report as wielding considerable influence on the council and reportedly known for shutting down discussion about the sexual abuse. Shortly after publication of the Times story, Rotherham Council commissioned the J Inquiry. Home Affairs Committee. Hearings. The House of Commons Home Affairs Committee began hearing evidence about localized grooming in June 2012, as a result of the Rotherham convictions in 2010, Operation Central, Andrew Norfolk's articles in the Times, and the Rockdale child sex abuse ring, Operation Span, which saw 12 men convicted in May 2012. The committee published its report, Child Sexual Exploitation in the Response to Localized Grooming, in June 2013, with a follow-up in October 2014 in response to the J report. In October 2012, the committee criticized South Yorkshire's Chief Constable, David Crompton, and one of its senior officers, Philip Etheridge. The committee heard evidence that 3 members of a family connected with the abuse of 61 girls had not been charged, and no action was taken when a 22-year-old man was found in a car with a 12-year-old girl, with indecent images of her on his phone. Crompton said that ethnic origin was not a factor in deciding whether to charge suspects. The committee said that they were very concerned, as was the public. During a hearing in September 2014 to discuss Rotherham, the committee chair, Keith Vaz, told Crompton that the committee was shocked by the evidence, and that it held South Yorkshire Police responsible. Asked about an incident in which a 13-year-old found in a flat with a group of men was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, Crompton said it would be referred to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. In January 2013, the committee summoned the head of Rotherham Council, Martin Kimber, to explain the lack of arrests, despite South Yorkshire Police saying it was conducting investigations and the council having identified 58 young girls at risk. Vaz questioned why, after 5 Asian men were jailed in 2010, more was not done. In Lancashire there were 100 prosecutions the year before last. In South Yorkshire there were no prosecutions. The council apologized for the systemic failure that had let down the victims. October 2014 report. The committee's follow-up report on the 18th of October 2014 detailed the disappearance of a Delaware's files containing data on the abuse from the Risky Business Office in 2002. The allegations were made in private hearings. Keith Vaz said, "The proliferation of revelations about files which can no longer be located gives rise to public suspicion of a deliberate cover-up. The only way to address these concerns is with a full, transparent and urgent investigation." The report called for new legislation to allow the removal of elected police and crime commissioners following a vote of no confidence. J. Inquiry Report. In October 2013, Rotherham Council commissioned Professor Alexis J., a former chief social work advisor to the Scottish Government, to conduct an independent inquiry into its handling of child sexual exploitation reports since 1997. Published on the 26th of August 2014, the J report revealed that an estimated 1,400 children, by a conservative estimate, had been sexually exploited in Rotherham between 1997 and 2013. According to the report, children as young as 11 were raped by multiple perpetrators, abducted, trafficked to other cities in England, beaten and intimidated. Taxi drivers were a common thread, picking up children for sex from schools and care homes. The inquiry team found examples where a child was doused in petrol and threatened with being set alight, children who were threatened with guns, children who witnessed brutally violent rapes and were threatened that they would be the next victim if they told anyone. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators, one after the other. According to the report, one child who was being prepared to give evidence received a text saying the perpetrator had her younger sister and the choice of what happened next was up to her. She withdrew her statements. At least 2 other families were terrorized by groups of perpetrators, sitting in cars outside the family home, smashing windows, making abusive and threatening phone calls. On some occasions, child victims went back to perpetrators in the belief that this was the only way their parents and other children in the family would be safe. In the most extreme cases, no one in the family believed that the authorities could protect them. The report noted that babies were born as a result of the abuse. There were also miscarriages and terminations. Several girls were able to look after their babies with help from social services, but in other cases babies were permanently removed, causing further trauma to the mother and mother's family. Sarah Champion, who in 2012 succeeded Dennis McShane as Labour MP for Rotherham, said this spoke volumes about the way these children weren't seen as victims at all. The police had shown a lack of respect for the victims in the early 2000s. According to the report, deeming them undesirables, unworthy of police protection. The concerns of Jane Sr., the former youth worker, were met with indifference and scorn. Because most of the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage, several council staff described themselves as being nervous about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought racist. Others, the report noted, remembered clear direction from their managers not to make such identification. The report noted the experience of Adele Wurr, the Home Office researcher, who attempted to raise concerns about the abuse with senior police officers in 2002. She was told not to do so again, and was subsequently sidelined. Staff described Rotherham Council as macho, sexist and bullying. According to the report, there were sexist comments to female employees, particularly during the period 1997-2009. One woman reported being told to wear shorter skirts to get on better. Another was asked if she wore a mask while having sex. The J report noted that the existence of such a culture is likely to have impeded the council from providing an effective, corporate response to such a highly sensitive social problem as child sexual exploitation. Several people who spoke to the J inquiry were concerned that Rotherham Council officials were connected to the perpetrators through business interests such as the taxi firm. The police assured the inquiry that there was no evidence of this. Resignations. The J report prompted the resignations of Roger Stone, Labour leader of Rotherham Council, and Martin Kimber, its chief executive. Despite being strongly criticized during appearances before the House Affairs Committee, Joyce Thacker, the council's director of Children's Services, and Sean Wright, the Police and Crime Commissioner, PCC, for South Yorkshire Police from 2012, and Labour councillor in charge of child safety at the council from 2005 to 2010, would not step down. They did eventually. In September, under pressure, Wright was asked to step down by Theresa May, then Home Secretary, members of his own party, and Rotherham's Labour MP Sarah Champion. He also resigned from the Labour Party on the 27th of August 2014, after an ultimatum by the party to do so or face suspension. Roger Stone was suspended from the Labour Party, as were Councillor Gwendoline Russell and Shaukat Ali, and former Deputy Council Leader Jahangir Akhtar, who had lost his council seat in 2014. Malcolm Newsam was appointed as Children's Social Care Commissioner in October 2014. And subsequently Ian Thomas was appointed as Interim Director of Children's Services. Reception. There was worldwide astonishment at the J Report's findings, and extensive news coverage. 10 of the UK's most popular newspapers featured the report on their front pages, including The Times, Guardian, Daily Telegraph and Independent. David Crompton, Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police from 2012 to 2016, invited the National Crime Agency to conduct an independent inquiry. Keith Vaz, then chair of the Home Affairs Committee, told Meredith Hughes, Chief Constable from 2004 to 2011, that Hughes had failed abuse victims. Theresa May, then Home Secretary, accused the authorities of a dereliction of duty. She blamed several factors, including Rotherham Council's institutionalized political correctness, inadequate scrutiny and culture of covering things up, combined with a fear of being seen as racist and a disdainful attitude toward the children. Dennis McShane, MP for Rotherham from 1994 until his resignation in 2012 for claiming false expenses, blamed a culture of not wanting to rock the multicultural community boat. Simon Danshuk, Labour MP for Rockdale, where similar cases were prosecuted, argued that ethnicity, class and the nighttime economy were all factors, adding that a very small minority in the Asian community have an unhealthy view of women, and that an unhealthy brand of politics imported from Pakistan, which involved looking after your own, was partly to blame. British Muslims and members of the British Pakistani community condemned both the abuse and that it had been covered up. Nazir Afzal, Chief Crown Prosecutor of the Crown Prosecution Service (CPS) for North West England from 2011-2015, himself a Muslim, made the decision in 2011 to prosecute the Rockdale child sex abuse ring after the CPS had turned the case down. Responding to the J Report, he argued that the abuse had no basis in Islam. Islam says that alcohol, drugs, rape and abuse are all forbidden, yet these men were surrounded by all of these things. Afzal argued that the cases were about male power. It is not the abuser's race that defines them. It is their attitude to women that defines them. The handling of the cases was a matter of incompetence rather than political correctness. He agreed with Danshuk that the nature of the nighttime economy skewed the picture. More Pakistani heritage men work at night and might therefore be more involved in that kind of activity. The incoming Director of Children's Services in Rotherham, Ian Thomas, disagreed, arguing that the nighttime economy is full of white blocks. 92% of the people in Rotherham are white. Alexis J. also disagreed. She told The Guardian in 2015 that working in the nighttime economy presents an opportunity but it doesn't present a motive. The UK Hindu Council and the Sikh Federation asked that the perpetrators be described as Pakistani Muslims, rather than Asian. Britain First and the English Defence League staged protests in Rotherham, as did Unite Against Fascism. Casey inquiry. Following the J Report, the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, Eric Pickles, commissioned an independent inspection of Rotherham Council. Led by Louise Casey, Director General of the government's Troubled Families Programme, the inspection examined the council's governance, services for children and young people, and taxi and private hire licensing. Published in February 2015, the Casey report concluded that Rotherham Council was not fit for purpose. Casey identified a culture of bullying, sexism, and misplaced political correctness, along with a history of covering up information and silencing whistleblowers. The child sexual exploitation team was poorly directed, suffered from excessive caseloads, and did not share information. The council had a history of failing to deal with issues around race. Staff perceived that there was only a small step between mentioning the ethnicity of perpetrators and being labeled a racist. The Pakistani heritage counselors were left to deal with all issues pertaining to that community, which left them able to exert disproportionate influence, while white counselors ignored their responsibilities. Counselor Jahangir Akhtar, in particular, was named as too influential, including regarding police matters. In February 2015, the government replaced its elected officers with a team of 5 commissioners, including one tasked specifically with looking at children's services. Files relating to one current and one former counselor identifying a number of potentially criminal matters were passed to the National Crime Agency. The leader of the council, Paul Lakin, resigned, and members of the council cabinet also stood down. Operation Clover, Trials, 2015-2017. December 2015, South Yorkshire Police set up Operation Clover in August 2013 to investigate historic cases of child sexual abuse in the town. As a result, 6 men and 2 women went on trial before Judge Sarah Wright on the 10th of December 2015 at Sheffield Crown Court, with Michelle Colborne QC prosecuting. 4 were members of the Hussein family, 3 brothers and their uncle, Kurban Ali, named in a Delaware's 2001 report. The Hussein family were said to have owned Rotherham. Ali owned a local minicab company, Speedline Taxis. One of the accused women had worked for Speedline as a radio operator. A 4th Hussein brother, Sajer Hussein, was convicted in November 2016. It was alleged in late 2018 that Arshad Hussein was contacted by Rotherham Council whilst in prison in relation to care proceedings for his child, which was conceived during a rape. The child's mother and victim of Hussein, Sammy Woodhouse, accused the council of putting her child at risk, and an online petition calling for a change in the law reached more than 200,000 signatures. On the 24th of February 2016, Ali was convicted of conspiracy to rape and sentenced to 10 years. Arshad Madash Hussein, apparently the ringleader, was jailed for 35 years. He appeared in court by video link and seemed to be asleep in bed when the verdict was announced. His lawyer said he had been left paraplegic by a shooting accident. The prosecution alleged that his claim to be too ill to attend was simply a ploy. Arshad's brother Banaras Bano Hussein was jailed for 19 years, and Basharat Bash Hussein for 25 years. 2 other men were acquitted, one of 7 charges, including 4 rapes, and the second of 1 charge of indecent assault. The court heard that the police had once caught Basharat Hussein in the act, but failed to do anything. He was with a victim in a car park next to Rotherham police station when a police car approached and asked what he was doing. He replied, "She's just sucking my cock, mate," and the police car left. Karen McGregor and Shelley Davies were convicted of false imprisonment and conspiracy to procure prostitutes. McGregor had worked for Kurban Ali as a radio operator at Speedline Taxis. She was sentenced to 13 years and Davies was given an 18-month suspended sentence. McGregor and Davies would befriend girls and take them back to McGregor's home. Acting as surrogate parents, the women bought them food and clothes, and listened to their problems. The girls were then given alcohol and told to earn their keep by having sex with male visitors. McGregor had even applied for charitable status for a local group she had set up, Kin Kids, to help the carers of troubled teenagers. She had been supported in this by John Healy, MP for Wentworth and Darney, who had no way of knowing that McGregor was procuring children for sex, and had attended a meeting at Westminster to speak about it. September 2016. 8 men went on trial in September 2016 and were convicted on the 17th of October that year. A fourth Hussein brother, Sajer Hussein, was jailed for 19 years for 4 counts of raping a 13-year-old girl and 1 indecent assault. The girl's family, then owners of a local post office and shop, had reported the rapes at the time to police, their MP, and David Blunkett, the Home Secretary, to no avail. First groomed when she was 12, the girl told the court she had been raped multiple times from the age of 13, on the first occasion in November 2002 by 9 men who took photographs. On another occasion she was locked in a room while men lined up outside. She was threatened with a gun, and told they would gang rape her mother, kill her brother and burn her home down. Every time it happened, she hid the clothes she had been wearing. In April 2003, when she was 13, she told her mother, who alerted the police. The court was shown video of an interview police conducted with her that month. The police collected the bags of clothes, then called 2 days later to say they had lost them. The family was sent £140 compensation for the clothes and advised to drop the case. Unable to find anyone to help them, they sold their business in 2005 and moved in fear to Spain for 18 months. Sajer Hussein gave an interview to Channel 4 News in 2014, after his brother, Arshad Hussein, was named in the media as a ringleader. Sajer attributed the abuse to girls wearing miniskirts. The biggest part of the problem you have these days is these young girls that are dressed up, i.e. miniskirts, stuff like that. They're going into the clubs, and they're ending up going with blocks, and stuff like that, and they're waking up next morning, and they scream rape. Or groomed. Asked about the allegation that his brother had assaulted 12-year-olds, he compared having sex with 12-year-olds to, like going and eating that dog crap. They wouldn't do it, and blamed social services for having let the girls out in the first place. Sajer's brother Basharat Hussein, already sentenced to 25 years in February 2016, was convicted of indecent assault and given an additional 7-year sentence, to run concurrently. 2 cousins of the Husseins, Asif Ali and Mohammed Weed, were convicted of rape and aiding and abetting rape, respectively. 4 other men were jailed for rape or indecent assault. January 2017. 6 men, including 3 brothers, went on trial in January 2017 before Judge Sarah Wright, with Sophie Drake prosecuting. All were convicted of 21 offenses in relation to assaults between 1999 and 2001 on 2 girls, aged 11 and 13 when the abuse began. The girls were assaulted in a fireworks shop and in a flat above a row of shops, both owned by the brother's father. One girl, aged 12 at the time, was locked in the extremely dirty flat overnight with no electricity or running water. A rape by Basharat Hussein was reported to the police in 2001. He was questioned but released without charge. One of the girls became pregnant at age 12, but she had been raped by 5 men and did not know who the father was. DNA tests established that it was one of the defendants. After sentencing, 2 of the men shouted, "Allahu Akbar," as they were led out of the court. May 2017. A 21st person was found guilty of sexual offenses in May 2017. National Crime Agency inquiry. The National Crime Agency, NCA, set up Operation Stovewood in December 2014 to conduct a criminal inquiry and to review South Yorkshire police investigations. The NCA inquiry was led by the NCA Director, Trevor Pearce, before being led by Deputy Director Roy McComb. As of 2016, the inquiry was expected to last 8 years and cost over £30 million. By June 2015, Operation Stovewood had identified 300 suspects. November 2017. 3 men were arrested in July 2016 and charged in December 2016 with the indecent assault of a girl under the age of 14 between June 1994 and June 1995. They were convicted following a trial in November 2017 at Sheffield Crown Court. The men befriended the 13-year-old in Rotherham before plying her with alcohol and raping her. Judge David Dixon told the three they had groomed, coerced and intimidated their victim and treated her like a thing. The girl went on to suffer from eating disorders, anxiety and depression as a result of her ordeal, the court heard. February 2018, a fourth man was convicted as part of Operation Stovewood in February 2018. May 2018, a fifth man was convicted in early May 2018 and a sixth on the 31st of May. Tony Chapman admitted 12 charges of indecently assaulting a girl under the age of 16 between February 1998 and January 1999 when he appeared at court on the 17th of April. He was also found guilty of 5 offenses against 2 separate girls including rape, assault occasioning actual bodily harm and threatening to kill following a 9-day trial at Sheffield Crown Court yesterday. The offenses took place between October 2013 and May 2015, when the girls were under the age of 16. Kurram Javed was found guilty of 1 count of sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl when he was 31 years old. He was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. June 2018, 2 men were charged with raping and indecently assaulting a 14-year-old girl. They were also charged with child abduction and taking 2 girls aged 14 and 15 to Sheffield for the purposes of sexual activity in 2002. July 2018, 5 men were charged with a total of 21 offenses, including rape and indecent assault against 2 girls under the age of 16 between 2001 and 2004. October 2018, a man was sentenced to 9 years in prison for sexual activity with a child in October. Darren Hyatt took the 15-year-old girl out in his taxi and showered her with gifts when he was 41. In late October 2018, 7 men, the largest number prosecuted under the National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood investigation so far, were also convicted of sexual offenses against 5 girls committed between 1998 and 2005. They were first prosecuted in September as a group of 8 men charged with various child sexual offenses, 2 of which were said to have raped a young girl in Sherwood Forest between August 2002 and 2003, giving her drugs and alcohol and threatening to abandon her if she did not comply with their demands. The girl later had to have an abortion after falling pregnant. One said she had slept with 100 Asian men by the time she was 16. August 2019 and August 2019, 7 men became the latest to be convicted under Operation Stovewood relating to the sexual exploitation of 7 teenage girls. More than a decade previously, at least 4 were already in prison at the time of sentencing. Aftab Hussain was sentenced to 24 years for indecent assault after being jailed for 3 years and 4 months in a separate investigation back in April 2016 after he admitted 2 counts of sexual activity with a child and attempted witness intimidation. Hussain, who worked as a takeaway delivery driver, contacted the then 15-year-old girl via social media in 2015 and took her out in his car whilst making deliveries and then made threats to hurt her if she told anyone. Masood Malik was sentenced to 5 years after being previously sentenced to 15 years in September 2016 under Operation Clover for similar offenses. Mohammed Ashan pleaded guilty to 3 counts of indecent assault. Ashan was already in prison serving a 17-year sentence, reduced from 19 years, for murder after an incident in a Rotherham nightclub in 2005 where he stabbed Kimberly Fuller 9 times after she confronted him for touching her inappropriately. Prior to this, he was jailed for threatening a former partner with a knife. Wasim Khalik was sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was then sentenced for a further 45 months after admitting 3 counts of witness intimidation after posting allegations against his victims on fake Facebook and Twitter accounts. He also made a phone call from prison to the National Crime Agency Control Center threatening 2 of the investigating officers, saying that he knew where one of them lived and that he hoped they died of cancer or AIDS. Independent Police Complaints Commission inquiry. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, IPCC, began an investigation into allegations of police wrongdoing following the J report. It was the second largest inquiry the IPCC has undertaken after the inquiry into the 1989 Hillsborough football disaster in Sheffield. That game was policed by South Yorkshire Police. As of March 2017, 9 inquiries were complete, with no case to answer regarding officer conduct, but recommendations were made to the force about the recording of information. Another 53 investigations were underway. According to Andrew Norfolk in The Times, one Rotherham police officer had been in regular contact with one of the perpetrators. In one incident in March 2000, he and a local taxi driver, who later became a Rotherham councillor, are alleged to have arranged for Arshad Hussain, arguably the gang's ringleader, to hand a girl over to police at a petrol station, in exchange for immunity. Another complaint concerned the same officer, who reportedly asked 2 of the victims out on a date. One victim reported this to police in August 2013, but no action was taken. The IPCC was also investigating the officer who failed to act on the report. The first officer died in January 2015 after being hit by a car in Sheffield, in an unrelated accident. 2020 Home Office report. The Rotherham case was one of several cases which prompted investigations looking into the claim that the majority of perpetrators from grooming gangs were British Pakistani. The first was by William in December 2017, which released a report entitled Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation, Dissecting Grooming Gangs, which claimed 84% of offenders were of South Asian heritage. However, this report was fiercely criticized for its unscientific nature and poor methodology by child sexual exploitation experts Ella Cockbain and Wakuas to fail, in their paper, Failing Victims, Fueling Hate, Challenging the Harms of the Muslim Grooming Gangs narrative, which was published in January 2020. A further investigation was carried out by the British government in December 2020, when the Home Office published their findings, showing that the majority of child sexual exploitation gangs were, in fact, composed of white men and not British Pakistani men. Beyond specific high-profile cases, the academic literature highlights significant limitations to what can be said about links between ethnicity and this form of offending. Research has found that group-based CSE offenders are most commonly white. Some studies suggest an overrepresentation of Black and Asian offenders relative to the demographics of national populations. However, it is not possible to conclude that this is representative of all group-based CSE offending. This is due to issues such as data quality problems, the way the samples were selected in studies, and the potential for bias and inaccuracies in the way that ethnicity data is collected. The report also added, based on the existing evidence, and our understanding of the flaws in the existing data, it seems most likely that the ethnicity of group-based CSE offenders is in line with CSA, child sexual abuse, more generally and with the general population, with the majority of offenders being white. Writing in The Guardian, Cockbain and Tufale wrote of the report that, the 2-year study by the Home Office makes very clear that there are no grounds for asserting that Muslim or Pakistani heritage men are disproportionately engaged in such crimes, and, citing our research, it confirmed the unreliability of the Quilliam claim. See also Notes. References. Works cited. The article cites the following books and reports. All other sources are listed in the references section only. Further reading. Home Affairs Committee, Child Sexual Exploitation and the Response to Localized Grooming. Second Report of Session 2013-14, Volume 1, House of Commons Home Affairs Committee. London, The Stationery Office Limited, the 10th of June 2013. Child Sexual Exploitation and the Response to Localized Grooming. Second Report of Session 2013-14, Volume 2, House of Commons Home Affairs Committee. London, The Stationery Office Limited, the 12th of June 2013. Child sexual exploitation and the response to localized grooming, follow-up. 6th report of session 2014-15, House of Commons Home Affairs Committee. London, The Stationery Office Limited, the 15th of October 2014. Miscellaneous revealed. Conspiracy of silence on UK sex gangs. The Times editorial, the 5th of January 2011. Rotherham child abuse scandal. The background to the report. BBC News. The 26th of August 2014. Ahmed, Samira, the 27th of August 2014. We shouldn't turn a blind eye to race over the Rotherham abuse scandal. The Guardian. Philip, Abbey, the 27th of August 2014. Report reveals the horrors of 1,400 sexually abused children in a British town and the system that failed them. The Washington Post. Talbot, Margaret, the 4th of September 2014. An old contempt in Rotherham. The New Yorker. Flanagan, Jake, the 4th of September 2014. How Rotherham happened. The New York Times. Do That, Ross, the 6th of September 2014. Rape in Rotherham. The New York Times. Too many in Rotherham turned a blind eye to child abuse. The Washington Post editorial board, the 15th of September 2014. Coker, Margaret, Flynn, Alexis, the 22nd of May 2015. One woman's crusade for UK towns' young rape victims. The Wall Street Journal. Wilson, Sarah, with Geraldine McKelvey, 2015. Violated. A shocking and harrowing survival story from the notorious Rotherham abuse scandal. London. Harper Element. ISBN 978-00081-4126-4. Opstovewood. Victims get justice after another 6 men guilty of sexually abusing young girls in Rotherham, the 28th of August 2019. National Crime Agency.